Well, hello and welcome to Creative Tuesdays. As you can see, we have a new color now. It's yellow because that's in fashion. But also this starts a very interesting episodic arc of having few episodes on wood construction and especially modular houses. So this is the first an introductory meeting where we will tell you a little bit about what are modular houses and what innovations currently are there. And the next one will be from Rudis. You probably know him from Ogre Library and some other innovative projects where he will tell you more about prototyping and how to achieve these interesting modular houses. So similarly to 3D concrete competition, this will be a several episode arc. So like in a TV series, you have a story arc that covers a few episodes. So that's what we are going here for. And if you are interested in 3D concrete, so for example, that one was quite a long arc. It had 18 episodes, or even probably a few more, where we learned from what is 3D modeling to how to 3D print, and also 3D printed some examples in real scale. So in this case, we are trying to do something similar. We are starting with this learning what to model and how to model modular houses, and then trying to also build some in real world. There are some already outlined outlines as the competition is not yet live, so registrations will also only open in a few days. But I can secretly show you how it will look like, so you can be the first ones who find out. Basically, the challenge will happen on 26th of May after a few introductory lectures. And the target is to build one modular house at the end in full. But this first 2-month prototyping or learning section is sponsored by Latvijas Finieris and Latvijas valsts meži, so organized from Latvijas Finieris in collaboration with Latvia Forestry Agency. And the main target of this, so the whole arch, is to design a modular house that is within a 20,000 euro budget. It might seem a lot, it might seem a little. We will have some examples later what you can do with 20,000. So it really depends where you spend them. The schedule for the whole project itself is currently in 6 big steps. So starting with April, and that is where we are right now, we have weekly activities. Mostly they will be lectures, but there will also be 2 excursions. One of those will be to see Pavasars, which is modular house manufacturer, and also a Windows factory in Cēsis. And on 8th of May, although that date might still change, we plan an excursion to Latvijas Finieris in Bolderāja Client Center with the on-site information where you can touch some plywood pieces, maybe try cutting them yourself, and also ask questions about the material to the people there. After that, we will have this hackathon. It will be a 4 hours creative challenge where 10 best teams will be selected. So it is important to participate as a team. And after that, the next stage of building this proposal will continue. Each team will get assigned some materials for consultations and some resources for consultations and materials. Might be something 400 or 500 euros per team. And during that, you prepare a print brochure, and then the best teams will win the awards. And the last stage, which we currently aim for the spring of 2024, will be actually building some functional full-scale prototypes. As an example, we are taking Abractsim's camping currently, which is owned by Latvijas Finieris, but it also might be a different location. We are still negotiating where we will build these buildings, but that is a good example of what we are looking for. So the first 4 steps are organized by Latvijas Finieris, and the 5th and 6th one is currently coordinated by Moorburg Studio and MECA Research and Development Institute for Forest and Wood Processing. What will be the evaluation criteria? So we have creativity and innovation as the first one. Currently, each of them have 10 points, where you basically need to design something that is actually new and innovative. The second one, which is equally important, is feasibility and cost optimization. So the client wants the project to be within 20,000 euros. So that's the lump price you get. How much of that is your profit and how much is material cost, etc. That's up to accountants. But that is one of the outlines of the project. It is, however, okay to have a product that has multiple steps. So for example, the first module is 20,000, and then you can offer some additional elements that cost extra. Team competences means that your team has to be competent to deliver the project. So it's good to look for some competencies like architecture, construction, maybe some engineering, maybe some financing. Maybe it's a good thing to have some people who know about automatization and CNC routing. The fourth criteria is usability, adaptability, and relevance to the target audience. So these are mostly functional things. How much of these can you cross out? Protection from elements, introduction of amenities like toilets, lighting, sanitary, ventilation. All of these probably cannot be done. Definitely cannot be done with 20,000. But how much of that you can do is a good question. And some teams who can deliver more probably will be more interesting without compromising the functionality. Sustainability is a very big one for the client, which is basically means that the house has to be autonomous or it has to use alternative energy resources. Of course, all of the criteria are optional because at the end of the day, the team that will deliver a buildable prototype will win. But these can help you stand out of others. And the last but not least is presentation quality. Basically, how clear is your idea, and can you persuade the jury, sell your idea, and stay on time. So the first pitch time will be 3 minutes, and the final pitch time usually is 5 to 10 minutes. So we will discuss how long is that one. The source for this today's introductory meeting is on innovative modular house examples is my PhD thesis, which I'm very actively writing, and this is the last year of that. So there's this great meme, how to stop stressing about writing, completing the writing. So currently I'm in this step. But the materials we will show you here have been selected through a very rigorous process. And basically we created a profile on social network. It is my own account where I targeted every possible interest regarding nature tourism. And I watched what type of buildings get promoted to me. So probably if you have been invited to experiential nature tourism Facebook group, and that's the group where I reshare all of these that get promoted to me. And I also bought almost all available books on Amazon that tackle this topic published in the last 10 years. And I put them in a dynamic database where basically I can track which sources have been producing these articles about architecture. And we also track around 80 criteria points. So basically building cost, building type, is it accessible to public, level of completion, what is climate, is it public or private, capacity of people, how is it affected by seasonality, how many stories does it have, and all of that gets then put in a visual overlay, where we can also show basically what show you comparatively how they compare together. But before we begin, you probably might have a question: what are modular houses? And we will tell you about that a bit later. First, we'll tell you what are Creative Tuesdays. So I will try to go very quickly over this, but it is important as we always have some new participants. So we gather every Tuesday, almost every Tuesday, where we try to switch on our creativity. This is already 95th meetup. And each Tuesday we have a new meetup. So for example, this is the first meetup that we actually tackle more like this wood construction. And some of these topics were suggested by participants. How we do it, we usually have emphasis on conversation. We try to learn as a group. And also we prefer modular approach, which basically means that each of these lectures can be used on their own, or they can be put together to form a more episodic arch. We have also design Tuesdays, 3D Tuesdays, and individual consultations available. And here are some of the meetings that might be interesting for you if you're interested in wood construction. There also is a meeting on how to build a portfolio. By the way, Lauris, this is the last place when I'm still able to access my portfolio. And there are some more ones. I would recommend having a check on this Miro platform where we talked about visual collaboration platforms, and Idea Fitness, where Elena tells you how to be creative. And also I have a drawing lecture, which I should probably send to Nicholas, about freehand drawing for ideation and how to use it. Last not least, Secrets of Laser Cutting is probably a great one as an intro to CNC. And Leonard Reinis Rosit is a great guy as a lecturer there. You can find all the videos here. And about us, we have built some houses, not modular yet. So it's also an interesting topic for me to explore as a researcher. We have built a lot of buildings in nature. So there have been some of these tree houses in Strenčia and Tagums. We also have looked at other ways how to build quickly. So for example, how to make inflatable houses. So we tried to make these tree houses inflatable. So there were different approaches. Then we now kind of are looking more. Actually, this Sunday we might have a meeting on that. How to grow buildings. So there are also some people in Latvia who are trying to replicate this, basically growing a house from several connected pots. We also have tried some rod structures, and now we have arrived at modular houses. So what are modular houses? Basically, they are like traditional houses. However, they are built in factory and assembled on site. So here's a typical example of where would you use these. This is Abraxim's camping, and they do have almost all of these are running out of renovational. Like they want to exchange them for new ones. So basically, instead of building them on site, they want to prepare the modules and then ship them there for some assembly and arrangement. That is the actual location where we try to prototype, most likely also during next spring. And all of these, and that's quite interesting for people who participate in competitions or for researchers, what are the typical problems of them? So there are four, probably there are more problems, but these are the big ones. One is transportability, how you transport the modules to the site. Other one, and we have talked a lot of these factories, they say that almost every client at the end of the day wants to customize them. And it's easy to make one module that is, reproducible and repeatable. Every client at the end of the day wants either a specific color or specific layout of the room, of the interior, etc. So customization is a challenge that every modular house production has to tackle. Of course, according to zoning and building codes, how much area can you cover, how the foundations are made, and settling and shifting, which means that a lot of times these houses over time start to either sag or shift or tilt if the wrong foundational approach is chosen. And there are innovative approaches how to make better and the more interesting modular houses at the end of the day. What actually really matters is can they attract the user group you are targeting them for. In this case, in this competition, you can target them for almost anyone, but for one of the main organizers currently, like Latvijas Finieris, is definitely interested in houses that attract tourists. And how to do that is usually using some kind of innovation. There are a lot of ways how to measure innovation, but one that I frequently look towards, as it's quite easy to comprehend, is this 5 innovation levels by Altschuler, which looks at how patents are being applied and how much elements they change. So as you go lower in a tier, there are easier innovations like standard solutions, which basically is the same modular house, only different dimension. In this interpretational case, in second one, it's change of system, which means that we do some qualitative changes, maybe change the material. The second or third one, in this case, is the solution across industries, which means we start to add some interesting elements. There may be the houses on wheels, maybe it actually is floating, like we have, or maybe it's transformable dynamically. The fourth and fifth are extremely hard. So the third one is already a little bit of engineering challenge. The fourth basically means that it's cross-disciplinary solution. And there is one example I will later show you. There is like a bike that transforms in a house. So basically you're using transportational series. Not only the house is transportable, but actually it's a transportation device in itself. So it's a bike. And the fifth one is the most hardest. It basically creates a new industry. Currently, we don't have that in construction necessarily. Maybe 3D concrete printing is in a way a new industry, for example, but it also more likely is cross-disciplinary solution. New industry is something like, for example, having AI. So it's a completely new type of approach that hasn't been available yet. So who knows, maybe through this competition, we actually get the first, unicorn who also discovers a new type of modular houses. So the examples we will show you today mostly are first three elements, and then there are some fourth and fifth. These all come from this research work I have done so far, but more interestingly, how do you arrive at innovations? And I will repeat this point a bit later, is by combining elements. In a very general level, you can have location-based elements, which are, for example, the topography of the plot, nearby bodies of water, landscape characteristics. It can be climate or local environment elements. Can be building type. For example, you can use a cabin type, you can use a complex of houses, you can have a tower, you can have a dome house, you can have a tent or shelter. They are built design principles, so you can use like repetition, symmetry, unity, variety, asymmetry. And there are also activities. For example, you can look at swimming, skiing, bike riding, playing. If you implement those elements, your idea gets more interesting and innovative. And of course, there are interaction modifiers, like, for example, accessibility features, local tourism intensity, amenities like kitchens, bedrooms, showers, bathrooms, air conditioning, etc., toilet types, and other hospitality elements that you can use in order to make your idea stand out. Here you can see some of these around the map. So we have covered a large part of the globe. However, today we will be showing like 80 more interesting examples. And what is quite interesting, the most active tourism destinations, of course, is the chicken and egg problem, you can say, because of that. There are more tourists, or there are more tourists because of that. But they're usually purpose-built for experience, which means that they actually have been designed in order to provide interesting experience for the people that are there, as opposed to some natural attractions that already exist, like Zvartnes, or I don't know, like Mount Everest, you know. So usually there are buildings that have been built by thinking how the client will experience the building. Another thing to think about is how you implement your module to house, or how you can attach it to house. And so there are ways where you just don't think about nature and just say it's an element that can be anywhere, you know, like almost like a space station. You can have a situation where you're mostly observing nature, so you don't really interact, but you observe. The third one is adjacent to nature, and the fourth one is integrated in nature. So these are the most common ones. Either the house is put on a foundation somewhere nearby a natural element, or it is semi-integrated. For example, if you look a slope house, which is integrated in the earth, that would be integrated element. Of course, there are fifth and sixth, which are made from elements of nature or hosts nature. So if sixth would be a glass house, then fifth would be these growing houses in a way, where the house is made from elements of nature. And the seventh is one where we combine several of these approaches. Traditionally, it's in larger complexes. And the eighth is only nature, where you basically don't have a house, but you just have a nature, or there is a naturally shaped element. For example, it's a cave or naturally formed crevice where people start living, for example, and you sell it as an experience. Another approach to think about in this competition extremely is these trees methodologies, which basically show technological examples how to solve problems. Either it's noise, either it's temperature, ventilation. So this inventory of trees argues that there are only 40 principles how you can solve them, either, for example, by mechanical elements, waveforms, operations that involve gears. So basically, if you have a problem, you look at trees map, and it can definitely help you to look at this problem more innovatively. But that being said, let's look at some existing modular houses, as that probably was why you came here. We will start with houses that resemble towers. So usually they are container houses turned upside down in a way. So here is 48 North, which is at one of the tower houses. So price per night there is 142 euros, built on 2021, so quite recent object. And its aim, quite vertical in this case, is to minimize its footprint on nature. But it also helps you if you have a small plot, you can put several of them together and have a small skyscraper city. It hosts 2 people, and it is located in a hilly area, which is probably why it's better to have it higher up. As you can see further, of course, it gives you some privacy. As people walk around it, they can't look inside the window. And the construction time took a lot of time. I see that it's built, like it was designed for 5 or 10 years. The second one is home box. So this is utilizing existing container houses, so it's not strict down. That's a good point. Not all houses here are modular per se, but they could be modular. So you can theoretically build a traditional house that is interesting and then decide how to make it modular and repeatable. So it's more meant as an inspiration. So this one is quite similar. And in this case, it has a little bit larger area and it's built a bit later. And as far as I know, this uses existing container elements. The sole box is even smaller one. It's basically like a large furniture element put in garden, and it's meant mostly you have a little kitchen downstairs and like a lounge and resting area up there, meant for warm climates. So it maximizes the airflows. As higher from the ground you get, the more air you get there. So you can see it's very cozily put between trees. You can have some apples kind of lounging inside your resting area. The GK would be probably a bit harder to make as a modular element, although it's possible. And this is a wood house that resembles this yurt or hut. So that's another way where you can take inspiration is these traditional abodes. And in this case, there were two ladies in their 60s who were social workers, and they wanted an interesting place where to serve the community. So they decided on this type of structure. It can host 20 people, so it's quite a large one, and it is semi-private. So Igloo Hut is one of the larger companies. So they cost around 50, 60,000 euros. The smallest modules are around 20,000, so comparable to our competition goals. They, if I'm not wrong, come from Estonia, and actually they have a quite well-developed website with Unreal Engine implementations, etc. And there you can either buy it as a sauna or as a livable unit. They are targeting wellness tourists primarily, and the company is called Igloo Craft, so it's worth checking up. It's one of their other more successful elements in the Baltics. Jakob Witzling cabins is just standard cabin on wheels, can be transported. I don't know if there is much to show here. But you can go further. I quite like the walk the line approach. It's not strictly modular, but it shows you how you implement like this long vertical or horizontal element. You can have some swings there. You can have some place where you can put your dirty clothes if you want to clean them, you know, living near sea. And the dunes are quite similar to what we have here in the Baltics. This one is built in 2012 and built by Studio Oslo School of Architecture and Design. So quite familiar to us. And the environment is coastal and beach, which basically is the same what we are dealing with. The Darwin cabins are one of these container house types where you refurbish existing containers. At first, it seems like a cheap and good idea, but actually rebuilding them is quite tricky because containers are not meant for people to live there. If you cut out windows, they become less structural. So at the end of the day, you end up building the house twice. So I would recommend thinking long and hard if you go for it. Actually, if you look below, you can also see how many of these have implemented toilets. So most of them will have toilets outside, and that is also what is in Abstract Sims camping available. So you have a large toilet complex. Not always you have to have a toilet in near your sleeping area, as the square meters are not that many. Sometimes it's the toilet is just somewhere else. Then you can serve several houses with it, but that's your choice if you try to implement it. It also is, of course, great cost-cutting measure. Then an extremely nice example from Latvia, not from wood, but there is this Spoglin image. So also wellness and nature tourism built in 2020, if I'm correct, hosts 2 people, and it's extremely small square. I think it's like 6 or 8 square meters. But it's located over a river, so it's very focused on location. As you can know, it's always location, location, location. And in this case, it is using an integrated approach next to the river. Here's an extremely expensive one, which is Diana Middlebrook Studios, built writers' cabins, which are 3 houses for 550,000 euros, or I think they could be dollars if it comes from USA. And that's one of the ways how you can build very expensively. The cheapest modular house we have here, or modular house inspiration example, is 60 euros. So we'll also get to that end of the deal. But if you look more closely, you can see that one of these reasons why usually it has higher cost is that either there's some design or art involved. So materials are better. You can see a lot of steel constructions. There are actually 2 levels of roofs integrated. A lot of times furniture is something that you have to look at whether it's included or not included. If the furniture is included, then it quite raises the cost of the building. And that's sometimes how the price differentiation is concluded. Also, you can see here if there's electricity, water, sewage, etc. It also is something that affects it. Clear Lake Cottage, quite large square area, 2,200 square meters, costs also 3 to 5 people. It's quite traditional. Basically, we have large windows and some modular walls. And we also have Nissan micro cabin here, which follows similar forms, can be put in water, etc. And that one costs only 2 people. For me, I quite like this one. It kind of allows you selectively to block out some of the views or open them completely up for shipping, for example, to protect the windows. So it's marketed as a writer's cabin, 46 square meters, and built in 2010. And basically, looking at the weather, etc., you can choose which stage to open or close. And Colorado outward bound micro cabins are also an element which is interesting with the fact that it has a terrace. So a lot of times when you go around, for example, Sweden, where it's very popular to travel with these campers, you see that almost all of the people who camp in campers, which is also in a way, a small tiny house, they have a terrace. So having a terrace is something that people really want, and that's something that is important to think about when you think about your designs. Another element that is quite well thought together and put together is this one, Minimot Katakuba. However, in this case, you can see it's formed as a triangle, not a triangle, but a plus sign, which is interesting when it's in a plain or near a hilltop, but it could be problematic if you have to put several of them together. So a view towards another house is not always the best view if there's someone that is washing or coming out for a walk. So in our case, if we are in Abrecht Sims trying to put together several of these elements, probably would not be the best approach. But it might be a good approach for Montehome, which is also two-story. Of course, two stories are more expensive, and the regulatory requirements might be higher. We will have a lecture where one architect will tell us more about regulatory elements, how much square meters you can use, and it's quite important for the client to use less in order to be able to not have to do a project for each of the houses that are put in nature. Grotto sauna is one where we gave a very high experiential score. And in this case, it's completely custom cut out of wood elements. So in this case, I think it's glulam, but I'm not super sure. The architects are partisans at the firm, and the square area is 75. So it's a sauna. The function, it's not meant for sleeping there, but it has a great view, and everything there is organically shaped. Next to it, there's a cheaper approach, which is Betty sauna, and it's floating. And in this case, it's basically just in first floor, you have sauna. On second floor, you have a resting area. And you can also jump in water, probably, if you want to. It's made from Estonia Academy of Arts in Sami, and it can accommodate 2 tourists. We also have Samerindala floating sauna, which is another type of these. So you can see this is like the arc of floating saunas. H3T sauna. I would recommend looking at the sizes of windows. So how each one of these approaches decides on working with them. So in this one, you basically don't have a window itself. You just have a facade that's open to the water. In this one, you have a custom shaped window, which probably will not be possible with 20,000 euro budget. Here, the walls itself are semi-translucent. And in this case, you basically don't have windows. And it's more like this. If you go outside, you have outside view. This is a lot larger one, Helsinki floating sauna, and the price per night there is 200 euros per person. As you can see, not everywhere we could find prices, so it's still a work in progress. But you can also look at amenities, like you have barbecue, fireplace, dining table, sauna, beachfront views, etc. It has a balcony, of course, so it's more like already you have a small conference room there, etc. So the target audience are business people who do a little, deal making near sauna. And you have Siberian floating sauna as I understand, it is a modular house you can buy. And the idea is to have a sauna that's a bit more organic shape. I don't know if you are meant to sit there, but that's a rest area on both sides. And in the middle, you have sauna with traditional walls. So this is one of the other interesting comparisons. So on the left, you have a sauna that has one large window, 31,000 euro cost price, and made by Backcountry Cut Company. And on the right side, you have a self-built sauna for 60 euros. So in material cost, just using some refurbished planks. So of course, one of the cost differences here is the material quality you use, but the other one is window. So having a large window costs a lot. That's something you can think about whether you want that, or maybe you just frame a view. Of course, a lot of these design magazines have just one large window in them. But then again, sometimes it's also interesting to not have a window and then come out and see the nature then. So these are the more raised elements. So they have, that's quite interesting that tree houses do charge a lot more. So even if you pay a lot more to build it, you can make back a lot more. So price per night in this cabin is 500 euros. In the 7th room, which is a larger one, it's 2,400 euros at the time of research. As modules, they each are unique. They built, I think one was Noheta, another one is Siren company. They are located, if I'm correct, in Sweden. And there's this part where each building is completely unique, so they are not repeatable, but in their principles they could be modular. The Moose Road residence and linear cabin are some elements where you use lines and line shape to basically you're blocking out some part, but mostly meant to be used individually in forest with quite large square areas in both of them. When you have holiday house in Zoo and writer's cottage. So these are two interesting elements for your frame of view. So in this case, you have a bit smaller window, but they are in both cases, you kind of go up and your sleeping or working area is a bit higher, which we also saw in some of the first examples. But in this case, it's not really a tower. It's more like a view or a smaller area where you can't really stand up all the way, but it's great maybe for sitting or sleeping. Here are some more of these. So this is the smallest one. It's just 9 square meters and like a capsule. So you can also think about way how you arrange these modular houses. Maybe there's one connecting element, and then you can, because a lot of times the clients which we work with, in this case also Latvia Plywood, they say that they have an issue that different type of families come. For example, sometimes there's one person, sometimes there are 6 persons, sometimes there are 3 persons, and having one modular house that can accommodate all of them is quite challenging. So maybe you have like a little connectable rooms that you put around shape. Another way how to work with the volumes is using nets. So this is quite interesting. Here you have involved terraces, which is quite interesting also as an approach. Ursa cabin is just a traditional cabin with a more interesting window. The tree house Duran is quite actually you maybe saw that the previous one here quite similar forms. The designer is the same. It's Bamram company, and they have built I think hundreds of tree houses. So if you are looking at just tree houses, Bamram in Germany, yeah, they're from Germany. They're quite specialized in that type of semi-organic tree house construction. And then of course we have ZLF, which is in Latvia, and I think they won one of the architecture awards too. Also quite traditional type of buildings. Latvian nature spa and very experience oriented. And also Podmai from Pavilosta, which is a collection of 6 houses that are connected to each other, floating on a pier. You also have this sauna, which looks like a bit like a witch's nest, and then raised on foot. So I will probably show you these books. In Marburg studio, we here have a small library because one of the research parts was buying most new books on experiential tourism, and one of my favorite ones is this micro architecture by Richard Horden. Although this specific example is not from it, but he has a very nice concept of touching the ground lightly. And this is one of these examples where you usually traditionally by Richard Horden's approach use 3 elements only, which are connected to the ground. And then on that you build a small platform on which you put your idea. So from saunas, there's missing one sauna. So it's basically a standing sauna where you can also walk up the tower. So it's actually 3 floors, but still in a very small area. So having this little kind of skyscraper area of saunas and the modular houses could be quite interesting. Then you have Marta V house, which is probably the largest amount of windows we have so far in 50 square meters. So I'm always working with windows. Remember that windows cost a lot and they're fragile for transportation, but of course they also do work. People do like them. I also like this watershed sauna, which is not sauna, but hut. And the 9 square meters seems to be the smallest area that usually modular houses work with. They also have some plans here. You can see how it's organized. And the double roofs, sometimes they are meant for water collection, sometimes they're meant for dealing with heat, because if you have 2 roof elements, the wind between them becomes better and helps to cool off the surface instead of heating it directly. It kind of works like an airplane wing, but only from thermodynamic perspective. And you have, of course, B8 sauna, which is similar to Marta Place. Communal cabins, also some type of modular houses that can be assembled. It's quite interesting that you see that there is a version without the windows, and there's a version with the window if you can choose. These ones won a lot of design awards and Centro Guadalupe. So there's a little modular element with this 20 square meters, and then it's put around the hill. So each one of them faces in a different direction and don't disturb each other. Each of them has a small wooden pot, not wooden, but a clay pot in which you can cook your meals. That's also something interesting, which when you offer them, if you have some unique elements like this, for example, in this case, this clay pot is not extremely expensive, but it's an interesting type of grill, which is not like, just having ugly grill, but you have a large clay pot where you prepare food like in a Korean style or something like that. This is a do-it-yourself playhouse. So just an interesting way how to work with this material as a window, not putting a window, but a plastic sheet. So there is a risk of it looking cheap, of course, but there are interesting ways how you do this recreational area, storage area, and vertical, like you get into the house with a little ladder. So that's quite interesting. The sky hut is comparatively not that expensive, 35,000, given that they have a very large roof, but that's situated in mountains. I like this Erie cabin because it kind of only has one relatively small window, but you can see from inside that it actually frames the view. So in every case, when you have a small window, sometimes you can say it's a defect. It can also be an effect that kind of frames the view and it becomes like a living painting. Also, if it's, people want to sleep a bit longer, it's much easier to close a small window than a large window. The Space of Mind is an interesting cabin, a little bit more dynamically shaped. Small square meters, only 10. In this case, cabin moss, another way of traditional cabin. These cabanas trio huts are ones without windows. Build cost total for two of them is 40,000, which means that you could theoretically build one for 20,000. A lot of it is examples. Portugal, USA, they do have more expensive building costs than Latvia. So take these numbers with a little bit of considerations. So House Arc, I did put this the Gene one as an example that actually very few of these are really self-sustainable, so that's a hard challenge. This one has a solar panel in this case, which is oriented towards sun, but if you would want to replicate it, you would always need to think when you put it, how the building is oriented. If you put the panel not completely connected to the building, you can then move them both. But in this case, you can also see, I think it's rotatable foundation in a sense. Then Mito cabin is just additional cabin, the Nido here too. That's quite important that sometimes you say, oh, I did not need a terrace, but the ground in nature sometimes gets quite wet or uncomfortable. So having even an open terrace is a plus and bonus. What is nice here, this one costs only 10,000 euros. So that is twice cheaper than what we have available for this building. Outlandia field station is exactly 20,000. So you can see that there is a tree house in that price range. We can argue if it's better, good or bad, but it's doable. And then we have some more of woodland. Writer's Retreat, which is a large tub, just on, but this is this Richard Horden's approach. You will see some more. So there are two more tree houses here. This is also very small, 10,000, 10 square meters. And this cabin on the border, like these framed cabins, two of these. This one involves some concrete too. It's quite repeatable, and it's from Iceland, so they made it so it can stand Icelandic weather. Then you have Arctic Glass Igloo Resort, which is like a floatable hotel, and the Heartwood Sauna, which kind of has a view on the river. Otherwise, quite similar. This is one of the rather most expensive ones. I think the build cost came close to $1 million, if I'm correct. Basically a large egg that is shaped from wood, and it's a boat that can be transported. I do not know how they made it not to turn around. I think they have this counterweight system where it doesn't turn around, but it's one of my rather favorites, and you can look at the stars from the top window when you are sleeping. Then you have Latgale houses. So this is also called cabin Anna type. There are a lot of these Anna houses in the world. You can Google them. Usually they either open or close. In this case, I think it's fixed, but having two little houses with connection in the middle, if you Google cabin Anna, that's something that comes a lot together. What you are interested in probably is not what has been built, but what has won competitions. It's of course not the first and not the last modular house competition. So as a closing slides, we do have some examples of these. So this is one from the past year's competition in B-breeders. So everything track, it has a modular system where you can create the building shape yourself. So you can see that this particular element quite well deals with one of the larger issues, which is customizability. It also has worked with sustainability. In this case, you can see how the solar panels are modularly attachable. You have water storage, you have closable roof windows, etc. And you even have a foundation system. The third one is speed nomads. also a triangular system that is, well, triangles work well on water because the weight of the house is displaced toward the bottom of it, becoming more stable. It also is modular in the sense that you can connect these modules together in different ways. You have, for example, facade elements, 6 types of facade elements, 6 types of non-functional facade elements, not the flat facade elements, and you also have choices how to combine them. And then you have a large variation of buildings that you can use. This idea was that it's self-built, so people can just have these drawings, order materials, and build the houses as a community together. And this is quite not familiar. Yeah, I think familiar with the name. So using these empty water or oil bins as a flotation device, and also some of them here are used as septic tanks afterwards. This one won the 3rd place, if I remember correctly, in a Guayamarana house. So it's a bit less modular, but more experience-oriented, where you have this circular bath in the center, and then you can build the modules around the kind of Roman type inner courtyard approach. Here you can see more on the selection of materials and the inner house plan. So you have only one open facade, and all the other ones just have windows. Probably not doable with 20,000 euros, but some of the examples, like you can see that these are meant as a heat trap, these concave arches, and then they also have implemented some water collection elements in the roof. So basically these arches direct water for the storage later. And this pop it up yourself is another modular element that can be built and expanded. So you have this kind of, we had this plus house. In this case, you can also decide which elements you add in the beginning or later. So for example, the main element could be 20,000, and if you have extra 10,000, you can add rooms as you grow later. Here is some axonometric views of that. And the modular floating home building here, this more resembles this kind of Mediterranean market, also put on tubs. So as you can see, a lot of these water houses have won some competitions. Here's another sliced approach where you can have slices of building and put them together. And these slices also consists of how, and this is quite important. This furniture always makes or breaks the modular house concept, especially if you are talking about these tiny houses which are smaller. And in that sense, having some pre-made ideas for that is quite good. Here you can also see how it transports on wheels, and then you can basically extend the house to accommodate for more people. And also connect several of them to build the house bigger and bigger later, which is also very important for our climate is heating. And you can see that all these walls are double walls and windows are double glazed. But of course, building all this system that expands and contracts is not tens of thousands, but hundreds of thousands usually. So this is example how these cross-grid elements work. Innovation examples, so there could be a lot of lectures on innovation. I will give you only one advice. Usually we say that creativity is connecting things. So when you look at Steve Jobs, when he made an iPhone, you know, like he made like iPod, the phone, and an internet, and then connected them together. Now everyone uses these. Or you have a space station which grows and connects, and you know, one of the highest scientific achievements we have. So connecting things means sometimes breaking the rules, putting your house underwater, throwing people out of houses, or making wheels that are houses, and sometimes you are having a house that houses other little flying houses. In this example in France, it costs only 60 euros to fly with these balloons. You also can have floating houses like here in Mordangle Lake in Latvia, which allow you to have an experience of having your own private island, which you can travel by boat, by plane, or in a combined approach. So remember that next Tuesday we have this prototyping with Bood workshop with Rodis Robenis. And before finishing today's meetup, I will also show you some of the books, because you can definitely come here to Marburg Studio and read of them. We don't give them home like National Library, but they are quite nice. So this one is Microarchitecture by Richard Horden. It's one of my favorite books, and it basically looks at several, oh no, I had marked where, how far did I read, and now I will have to look again. But basically he looks at houses that are transportable by helicopters, and he worked with students where they actually went on hikes in Greenland, etc., and built them. So he's just like an extreme inspiration. They built several of these prototypes, and they even built like for Queen of England elements, and they were very like sailing, camping oriented theme, and they built in some of the most extreme locations on the world. So it's early 2010s. So in that sense, it's a great inspiration how to be innovative. If you like more traditional tiny houses, then this is a book not on modular houses, but on tiny houses. So just, like a glorified Instagram reel of different ways so you can work with furniture, plywood, modular, MDF, particle boards to create small living environments. And with 20,000, you can't build something very large. So seeing how the different types are solved, I really like this floating bed. It's easy to clean, for example, or etc. So these are some great examples in 150 floating houses. Then there is green architecture. When you look at ways how to implement architecture in greener approach, you can see how to do carbon traps, how to work with the live facades, how to work with very light construction elements. Because in this plywood competition also, you don't need to build with plywood. That's something they said. They would be happy if some elements are used there. But of course, it's impossible to build a house only from plywood. And where it's rational, you can use different and other materials too. This is definitely prefabrication building. So just call a book, it's called Prefab Living. And it's basically different type of modular houses, like strictly modular in a way that they are prefabricated and then transported to the site and assembled. Not the most innovative examples, so you can see most of them are quite traditional in their view, but there are some lot of interesting examples what actually can be bought and already exists out in the market. These are really cool because these are now, and Anna, maybe you can bring the Bob Botanic book. Maybe there are some more. I think we had a few more. So this is my cool houseboat, which basically looks at some of the examples that are floating houses. So in this competition, we are not that much looking at floating architecture. It can float, but in general, it's always nice to have something on the water. And this book explores a lot of these examples. This one I really like, the triangular floating elements. What else? We have escapology, where buildings where people escape to when they are tired from office life, and written by two people who are cabin oriented very much. See some of these examples. You maybe saw also, this is the Plus house we looked today at. Here are some tree houses, of course, some also rural houses. Yeah, that's the one. So also some just standard cabins, ways how to work with interiors. So again, I would say this is a lot more story-oriented book. And of course, we couldn't bring all of them here. There are like, I think, 50 books that are somewhat regarding architecture. So this is the one we are currently working with, is basically growing architecture. It's from this architect and researcher Ludwig Ferdinand from Germany. He actually looks at ways how you can prune and assemble buildings by just growing the trees yourself. And they grow them in pots to assemble a load-bearing structure in just matters of few years, as opposed to decades in traditional approach. So this building is 5 years old and it already is load-bearing. Then we have another book called The Best Tiny Home Ideas, because that is a series and they have a bunch of tiny home books. We bought two newest ones as some of the ideas repeat, but you can see there are just a bunch of little tiny houses on different elements. This is a very nice book. It's called Cabins. And just looks at ways how you can build cabins. They have container houses, you can guest houses. It has a really nice way how they structure them together. It's a bit text heavy, so they also go in construction, how the house was built, etc. So in these ones, it's worth flipping through. There are a lot of great examples on cabin constructions. And then one of my favorite books personally is this, well, that architect is a great inspiration. Like if I had to choose between Richard Horden, or Terenobu Fujimori from Japan, I would probably not choose, as they both are great in their own way. And he builds these very sculptural houses, which should be probably hard as a prefab or modular house, but it's very nice as a story. So he builds a lot of tea houses, a lot of buildings that are very nature involved, from live elements, etc. So definitely worth checking out if you're ever in Japan. Just visiting some of his destinations are very rewarding experience. And last but not least, and you probably have seen this one because we already checked as an example, this building, it's off the grid. So these are looking at buildings that are off grid, basically how to achieve autonomy in the buildings that are not connected to the grid and build in wilderness. So a lot of examples from that type of house. That's some of our books available here. And otherwise, maybe you have some nice questions for us, and we're ready to answer them. Those which we are allowed to answer, because maybe some of them are still a secret regarding competition rules, but you can definitely ask them, and then we will let you know. So I will take a sip of coffee. Meanwhile, you can start thinking if you have any questions. Oh, great. If there are no questions, it means I forgot to switch on my microphone for the whole lecture.
When does the registration start and when it closes?
So definitely by the next workshop by Rudis, and it closes at 10th of May. So you will have roughly 3 weeks to register. And the first event is not hard. It's only a 4-hour hackathon, but in person in Jelgava. And meanwhile, every Tuesday, we will have some activities. We will also have one practical workshop. I will try to build an acoustic house, little tiny volume, which is 4 square meters. So the smallest house you can possibly imagine. More like a little acoustic house inside of Riga Technical University. So that's somewhere around 16th of May or 15th of May or 17th of May, but we will announce them when they come closer. So definitely say subscribe to this Creative Tuesdays channel, and also you can click on the Modular House Challenge. If you Google that on Facebook, Facebook search it, you will definitely find our platform where we will also continue to add more activities during these next 6 weeks. Well, let's hope to see you all in the next meeting with Rudis, and meanwhile, have a great, great rest of the week, and see you on the next Tuesday. Yeah, Andra sent you the link where you can also save it and click in and follow more. Cheers, and thanks for joining us. Goodbye.